We were finishing God's detailing of the creation. In both creation accounts, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, creation climaxes with the making of human beings. Notice both the detailing of creation and something else, providing for creation. Continued creation, creatio continuata. This is a creation where God is okay not being done. Stays involved, bringing this creation to where he wants it to go. It's not just the woman who represents providence. All the animals represent provision. In fact, humanity is envisioned in this chapter as being God's providence for the creation. Right? There was no one to work the soil. There was no one to make the garden be what God intends it to be. So he made us. So God doesn't just provide for us, God provides us. The technical theological term for this is providence. God provides for the creation. Renews it, maintains it, cares for it. You heard this in Psalm 104. If you withhold your breath, your creatures die, but if you send it, they're renewed, and you renew the whole face of the earth. So Psalm 104 also sees this interactive relationship where God stays involved maintaining the creation, providing for it, and providing it for itself. All right? In fact, this is neat. Coming right after Genesis 1, where God provides plants for our nourishment, God provides us for the plant's cultivation. Some things to point out here. The creator of the universe is also the redeemer of the universe, who is also the perfecter or the finisher, the completer of the universe. You might be thinking, well, yeah, but that's not what a lot of people in the 2nd century were thinking. Gnostics rejected the claim of continuity between Jesus and the Creator. Jesus came to save us from the Creator, right? Remember that? The doctrine of providence identifies the same God who originates us with the God who saves us and perfects us. The theologian who put that with the greatest clarity early in Christian tradition is Irenaeus of Lyon. He was writing expressly against Gnostics who rejected the continuity of the two. Now, in every one of these aspects of the doctrine of creation, I wanted to give you Israel as an example that helps you understand how it plays out in Israel's own life and why it matters to Israel, right? So Israel's beginning is not technically ex nihilo, but it's a nation that's made from no nation at all, from people who can't reproduce. And Israel's life and structure, even its Sabbath observance, respects God as the detailer and the arranger and the orderer of creation, where everything has its place, including us, including our days. Where is providence in Israel's history? Well, maybe the best place to see it begin is where God tells Moses, I will be with you to deliver you. God is with Israel. Even when Israel isn't particularly with God, God never abandons his people. God provides for Israel. God is active in Israel's life. Not just a source, not just way back at the beginning making it eventually happen, but cultivating Israel, right? Tilling and tending and pruning and growing Israel. And making Israel not just mature, but making it a people who are beneficiaries of all God's glory, trustees of God's name, the word for that kind of beneficiary in the ancient world is a son. A son inherits from a father. A father is the benefactor of all the father has to the son in this ancient patriarchal society. This is probably the primary meaning that Jesus has in mind when he calls the one who sent him Father, and when he calls himself Son. What he means is that he is the object of the Father's bequeathing, the object of the Father's inheritance. He is the heir. And because Jesus is the heir, the promises that God gives long ago are fulfilled, that Israel will be God's heir. We'll say more about that when we discuss Jesus' career. That's radical provision. It's not just that God maintains the universe in working order the way I maintain a car. God instead is, well, on the one hand, God is redeeming. When the world goes wrong, God sets it back right. And that's what most of us think of as the doctrine of salvation, right? When we put things wrong, God sets them right. God redeems, and that's radical providence. But God also brings creation to a new place that had not earlier been the case. This is a big deal. Some Christians, especially because of the influence of Platonism, think of the world as originally perfect. In Genesis 2:24, everything is perfect. Everything's done. And the fall just costs the universe its perfection, and redemption has to happen in order to bring it back into its original perfection. No. If that were the case, the picture in the end of Revelation would look exactly like the picture in the beginning of Genesis. But it doesn't. New stuff has happened. Yeah, there's the tree of life, and there's the river, but there's also the New Jerusalem. And there are the kings of the nations with their treasure. And you realize that God has been taking creation along, that Genesis is just the beginning. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth and filled it and formed it. And that wasn't the end, that was just the beginning. God plants a garden, a newly planted garden. And he says, okay, go to work. I have a job for you. There aren't even any fences. I wonder whether we're meant to think, because Eden means plain, it just means expanse, that this is just where God wanted us to start. Start here, work from here. Creation isn't perfect. It's imperfect. It's not bad. It's not flawed. The imperfect tense doesn't indicate any of that. The imperfect tense just indicates stuff not finished, still happening. So everything's good, but it's not perfect. So God has to do two things. God has to rescue us and rescue the creation where we've sent it in the wrong direction. But God also still has to do what was intended all along, which was to bring the old to the new, which was to bring the imperfect to its perfection, to its finish. Both of them are forms of providence. And the perfection envisioned here, which unfolds as the story moves on, shows you, heirs, beneficiaries, they are full participants, full and free participants in what they inherit. That's the image in Galatians. That Israel's Torah was to mature it until it was time for it to inherit freely. And for Gentiles, the elements of the universe, the rules of other nations are also the same. They're playing the same role. Now, to help you understand that, let me give you some alternatives to providence that'll help you appreciate the relationship that this implies. Because remember, creation is a word that names a set of relationships we have with God. Well, the first one I want to show you is fatalism. Fatalism is a way of understanding the interaction between God and creation, right? That understands God as completely dominating, like a puppeteer, so that the universe simply acts the way God chooses to make it act, with no character of its own, no responsivity of its own, simply acted upon. What is the difference between fatalism and predestination? Because a lot of people think of predestination in terms of fatalism, right? So sometimes not at all in the way people use them. But Orthodox Christianity rejects fatalism. John Calvin, who laid out the doctrine of predestination in its most rigorous Protestant form, John Calvin denies fate. Christians are not objects of fate. If there's no freedom of action, then the sole agent, the sole cause of everything in the universe has to be God. And then there can't be sin. Because sin is opposition to God. God wants Israel to be free beneficiaries of his covenanting life. God invites his people to pray, to ask, right? To act. That's a genuinely interactive relationship. It's not a pretend interactive relationship, it's a genuinely interactive relationship. And so God invites us as true agents, to be agents, to cooperate with him. When we refuse, that's what sin is. The best example that shows that fatalism can't be is love and cooperation. Sin is just a more striking and sad illustration of the same thing. So if someone asks you, hey, do you believe in predestination or free will? You say, well, yes. Who doesn't? It's we who have made those into mutually exclusive, incompatible opposites. Fatalism is incompatible with providence. And independence is also incompatible with providence. Because we're not independent. We are provided for and we are provided. And that takes us to the other alternative that I want to show you another way of misconstruing this relationship, deism. Deism is, Americans know it best in its 18th century form, Thomas Jefferson and the like. But it's really a product of a Newtonian age that thinks of the universe as a closed system of causes and effects. A really big billiard table where once things are going, once forces are in motion, they simply keep reacting, bouncing off one another, producing a chain of reaction that keeps the world moving. That Newtonian world seemed to exclude the possibility of new things happening. And so deists, trying to understand who God is, given a Newtonian framework, envision God as the one who gets it all started, the one who builds the billiard table and knocks the balls to begin with, and then it runs on its own. Or more commonly, God is like a watchmaker who makes a machine, this is the Newtonian era, makes a machine, winds it up, lets it go. And the beauty of the self-perpetuating motion of the machine is the confirmation of God's wisdom. But if you're in that machine, you're no longer actively related to God. We still have a relationship with God. God is our original cause back in the past. But God is no longer actively maintaining the machine. Human beings had wills which were non-Newtonian. Maybe because they were non-material. So you can see how a non-Newtonian force within the system could yield unpredictability, even freedom. Deism is a very influential way of thinking. Again, if you grow up with a Newtonian framework, it seems like that you couldn't rationally believe in any other kind of God. If the world is a closed system of causes and effects, then there can't be things like miracles. So Jefferson denied the miracles in the New Testament, thought they were, he sort of thinks like Schirmer. He thought they were products of a primitive, non-scientific, pre-scientific mindset that needed to be rejected. So Jesus' sayings, Jesus' teachings are quite wise and wonderful, and he said they stand out from the rest, the miracle stories and the like diamonds on a hill of dung. And he took his New Testament and he cut out the rational good stuff and placed it together and got rid of the rest. And the Jefferson Bible, it's his edition of the four Gospels, the rationalized version, if you like. Out of the conviction that we are independent and have been made that way by our Creator. What's our relationship with God? It's one of gratitude and study to try to appreciate our Maker. But it's not one of dependence for anything new. It makes no sense to pray for intervention, to pray for a miracle. According to deist logic, we're free. And so what God provided, God already provided at the beginning. And so the resources that we need are already in the system. If you want to put it in a nice, crisp way, God helps those who help themselves. To help yourself is to take advantage to what God has provided. And God hasn't provided more than that. And if you don't help yourself and you just wait to be waited on, you'll be waiting forever. The way God helps us is by us helping ourselves. If you want that in a political vision, you look at the Declaration of Independence. You don't do what Christians did earlier, or what Israel did. You don't pray for a better king. Instead, you figure out that the universe is a closed system of causes and effects that was endowed by its creator with principles, rights, and governments are instituted among human beings to protect those rights. They operate according to the rules of the system, and when an agent who's entrusted with that power abuses it, then the system is self-correcting by illegitimating the ruler and authorizing the ruled to institute a new government in the old one's place. It's a self-correcting mechanism. It's a deist theory of justice. Independence. Think of fatalism and independence as two false alternatives to providence. Israel isn't fatalistic because it knows that it's responsible for its actions and free and made to inherit the promise. Israel's not deistic because it knows that it lives in God's providence. And God's providence takes both natural and supernatural forms. Rain, sunshine, one another, right? The man and the woman for one another. The trees for us for the trees, etc. Natural as well as supernatural forms. I think it's the deistic baggage in some treatments of evolution that make evolution seem like it excludes the possibility of God acting and providing in our universe. Of course, naturalists often have a kind of closed system of causes and effects in mind when they look for natural phenomena for accounting for how things happen. So it might be that a rejection of deism and an affirmation of an active God of Israel can diffuse some moral objections to people appreciating natural processes behind things getting to be the way they are. You know? I mean, there are miracles. Jesus isn't dead. That's exhibit A. And that's not the only intervention of God either in the past or in our present. God keeps acting and doing things. Natural things and supernatural things. Just listen to testimonies if you aren't convinced. And you can, you don't have to take them at face value, investigate them, scrutinize them. We live in a strange world where God does strange stuff. It's really cool. Providential, strange stuff. Given what Christians know about God through Jesus, given what Christians know about God acting in the Holy Spirit, I don't think we have to worry about deism. And I don't think we have to worry about some scientific theory overturning our core convictions or our core data about God's ongoing active care for the world.